Join me as I dive into the chaos of a Trump rally and the intensity of Venezuela protests. Let's see if I can unpack the hottest topics of 2024. We're living in a world where politics is more polarized than ever, and two recent events have caught my attention: a Trump rally and the protests in Venezuela. These two events may seem worlds apart, but they both represent a cry for change, a desire for something different. And that's what we're going to explore today. One of the underlying issues that leads to these kinds of events is the growing divide in politics. We're seeing more and more people identify strongly with one side or the other, leaving little room for common ground. This polarization is causing tension, and it's no surprise that it's boiling over into rallies and protests. In Venezuela, we're seeing years of social unrest coming to a head, with citizens demanding change from their government. It's a complex issue, but at its core, it's about people feeling unheard and ignored. The issues at play in both cases are multifaceted. In the US, we're seeing a reaction to the perceived elite, with many feeling that their voices aren't being represented. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, it's about basic human needs like food and medicine. But despite these differences, there's a common thread: people are feeling frustrated, and they're taking to the streets to make their voices heard. We're seeing governments struggling to respond to these demands, and it's leading to some pretty intense moments. The Trump rally, for example, was all about energy and passion, with supporters eager to show their devotion to the cause. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, we're seeing violent clashes between protesters and authorities, with people risking everything to be heard. When we look at the atmosphere of these two events, it's clear that they're fueled by very different motivations. The Trump rally was largely about enthusiasm and excitement, with people cheering on their candidate. In Venezuela, it's about desperation and fear. People are fighting for their lives. And yet, despite these differences, there's a sense of urgency and importance that unites both events. One of the most striking moments from these events was when Trump supporters began chanting USA, USA, in response to anti-American chants from protesters in Venezuela. It was a moment that encapsulated the entire conflict: two sides, each convinced they're right, and each determined to be heard. It was a moment that showed us just how high the stakes are, and how much is at risk. In that moment, we saw the emotions and fears that are driving these events. We saw people who are desperate for change, and willing to take risks to make it happen. And we saw the deep divisions that are tearing us apart. So, what did we learn from these two events? We learned that politics is personal, and that people are willing to fight for what they believe in. We learned that the stakes are high, and that the consequences of our actions will be felt for years to come. And we learned that, despite our differences, we're all in this together. Thanks for joining me on this dive into the chaos of a Trump rally and the intensity of Venezuela protests. If you've got thoughts on these events, drop them in the comments below. I want to hear from you. And if you're interested in exploring more of the hottest topics of 2024, be sure to check out my next video.